Hello, everybody. This session is for opera singers and for actors. And in my studio, I do coaching sessions with people who are straight actors as well, usually working on some sort of accent because I have good proficiency and especially with different American accents. But I do work with actors and for other reasons in working on scripts. But mainly, as you know, most of my acting has been as an operatic actor. So that's where I come from most. I actually did a standard degree, a BA in drama at a university, and I did most of my work there in something non-operatic, something quite different actually. It was, my degree was in acting, but with an emphasis on readers' theater and oral interpretation of literature. So you can see how both of those would come in handy in opera. So what I wanted to talk about today, and mainly to you opera singers who find yourself having to be an actor, even if you didn't start out that way. I mean, many of you had musical talent to begin with. You had a voice, and you had vocal talent, and you wanted to sing opera, and it just turned out that, gee, you have to act as well as sing. And maybe you didn't really have any training in that. And maybe you didn't even think you had a great deal of talent at that. It certainly happened that way during some eras in the history of opera. There was certainly an era at one point where we didn't really request much acting from an opera singer. You know, the old caricature was that the opera singer stood with his hands out like holding invisible trays, or he put one hand up for high notes and one hand down for low notes, and that was about that was it. And even though that's a caricature, sometimes we didn't get much more than that. But all that has changed. Now you're expected to be an actor. And it depends a great deal on your level of talent, how you will view your acting with your singing on the stage, on the operatic stage. Will you give as much attention to your acting as you give to your singing? Will you train as hard in your acting as you do for your voice production, for your singing? What do you really intend to do on the stage? You say you want to become an opera singer. What does that mean to you? Besides someone who is on stage in a costume, singing great music, and also portraying in some way a character. But what does that mean to you? If there's anything besides that it means to you. Some people are very, how shall I say this? They're very inartistic about doing art. I know several opera singers who just view it as a job and go to work and sing and come home and, you know, they're not thinking artistically. And if they lost their ability to sing tomorrow, wouldn't be any big deal. They'd just go do something else. Now, that kind of person has always intrigued me and infuriated me because it's the total opposite of who I am and how I view, or viewed now past tense, my work on the operatic stage. So what do you want to do as an actor? If you've had training already as an actor, and let's start with that presumption. I'm going to presume that people who are listening to this right now are either straight actors who have been trained, perhaps just in university, but maybe also you've done workshops or been to New York, but you've had training, or you're an opera singer who has had some instruction in acting, maybe even have done some professional coaching with a good skilled acting teacher. That'd be great. But that's where I want to look, and that's what I want to talk about. That kind of person. So in our training, most of us had to deal with this controversy of whether we were representational actors or presentational actors. And they were always the dualistic pair to choose from. There was either Sarah Bernhardt or Leonora Duse. So you either Bernhardt or Duse. One of the two. And how did you fare in that competition? I was always on the Duse side. I was always for the method, and the method worked perfectly for me in opera because it was discovered in opera. Stanislavski went all throughout Russia, observing the best actors of his day all over the country, and he was trying to see if there was something they all had in common, but he was also looking for someone, if there was someone who could stand out as the greatest actor of his time in Russia. And he found the greatest actor to be Fyodor Shaliapin, the opera singer actor. And he said, frankly, Shaliapin is my method. Now, whether or not, nobody alive has seen Shaliapin work on stage. We've only seen very old films, or very bad films, so we really don't have anything to compare, or we don't know how to judge Stanislavski's appraisal. But since Stanislavski gave us the method, we're going to have to believe that he actually did see it in Shaliapin, and that therefore it is indeed possible to use the method acting approach in singing and acting opera. So there's that issue. If you side with the Duse, and if you are content to use the method, what do you want to do in opera with your acting? And that question is always for the straight actor, too. You have to have, Uta Hagen told us in no uncertain terms that every actor has to have a point of view about the world. And that point of view about the world that you have informs your acting. It certainly colors what you want to do with your acting. There are a few method actors who are so good at what they're doing. Take De Niro. I don't think there's anything that De Niro could not play. I think if you wrote the greatest or the craziest character, if De Niro decided to act it, he would have no difficulty. I don't think he has any challenges that way. He probably is the only human being that I can think of right now who would fit that. Now, Brando was terrific, but Brando was better in some roles than others. He was not polymorphous like Robert De Niro. And I wonder, I would love to be able to get a cogent answer from De Niro if he has a point of view about the world, or if he has something that he is intending to do in acting besides just turn into that character. So, let's go to opera. And one of the best actors in opera ever, certainly in the 20th century, was John Vickers, the great Canadian tenor. But the great Canadian actor doesn't mean that he was an award-winning actor all the time. He wasn't. But there were times when he was an almost spellbinding, magnificent actor. And he had perfect understanding within himself of what he wanted to do. He said that he wanted to use the art, his art, of singing and acting in opera to inspire the audience to look up and ask for themselves about the great issues of life, the great things of life. What is truth? What is beauty? And he says, art can't give the answers. He says he couldn't give the answer, but he wanted to inspire the audience to look at those issues for themselves. He obviously felt that society was not encouraging people in vast numbers to look at those deep subjects. And it's true. You know, many people go through their lives and do not think in any deep way about such subjects. And here he said that was the point of his acting. He said maybe it would be worthwhile to do a performance and only inspire one or two people in the audience. Might be worthwhile. Now, if you look at that, now you begin to see what I mean in my question. What do you intend to do with your acting? What do you want to do? I'll go back now many years ago when I was shortly after I'd just begun singing opera. And my agent called me and said that he had successfully booked me to do a tour with Boris Goldovsky in the Goldovsky Traveling Opera Company, and I was going to be doing the role of Rigoletto, which is an operatic version of King Lear, really what it is. And that was great. Now, Boris Goldovsky had a reputation for wanting acting, and he was not method, but he had a reputation of having his own method of achieving some sort of synthesis of sound, music, and meaning that was impacting to the audience. So he required that if you did a tour with him, that you would come up to his headquarters in Massachusetts and do a workshop with him first on the opera that you're going to be touring with, and I was happy to do that. So I went up there, and they were already in rehearsal, and so I just basically got up on stage and joined them when it came to the places where Rigoletto was called to enter and to sing and act. And as soon as I did, it sparked something within these young singers. They were all very young singers, in their early 20s or late teens even. So this was a big deal for them to be doing a big workshop with the great Boris Goldovsky. And I mean that sincerely. He was a great man. And so my type of method acting really sparked them. They said, "Oh, wow, real television acting." And I started to laugh because I don't normally think of the caliber of acting I see on TV as being all that great. But in terms of what they were comparing my acting to, in the typical old-fashioned lousy opera acting, to them, my acting was real TV acting. So I was sort of surprised that Goldovsky had not groomed them better and introduced them to how to act on stage better than he had, but he hadn't, and at that point, then the cat was out of the bag. So he brought all of the singers down to him, and he went through the opera, scene by scene, line by line, character by character, explaining the plot and what happens here and what characterization is going on. And then those kids started to come alive because they didn't have any information. And their kind of acting that was expected of them was basically just motions and movements. Motions and movements are not acting. They're involved in acting, but they are not acting. So at the end of a couple of weeks of doing that, we had some very successful shows of Rigoletto, and they had all grown a great deal. And I had a very cordial relationship with Mr. G, as he liked to be called, Boris. And a couple of weeks later, then we started a tour. And we toured all over the States. It was Boris Goldovsky had the last operatic touring company in the world. Used to be there were several touring opera companies, but you know, the difficulty and the expense of travel, they dropped out, and Goldovsky had the last. And it was as close to being in a circus as I've ever been, because everybody had to muck in and help. We had to help offload the sets and costumes, and had to help erect the sets. It was not a job for a prima donna. So while I was with Goldovsky, this is my cat who loves to come. This is my lovely Himalayan who's in a lion cut right now. She likes, when I talk or sing, she likes to be here. I had a discussion with Boris Goldovsky about using the method and what he felt about it, and he basically was non-committal, but he certainly liked my acting, so he gave me carte blanche to do what I wanted to with the character. And we came to a little piece, a little Pax Romana, he said, as far as he was concerned, the blocking was his, but the character was mine. And you will be very fortunate in life if indeed you will get a director who will be that generous with you and say, the blocking is mine, but the character I'll leave to you. Most of the time now, let's say this, the insecure stage directors don't want to give you that much freedom, and the famous stage directors have too much of an ego to give you that freedom, and so you may not get that, but I hope you do, because it's only with that that you can really make a choice on what you want to do as an actor. So let's take Rigoletto, which is an operatic King Lear. Yes, I love you, baby. You see, Verdi was very successful, as you know, if you're an opera singer. Verdi was very successful setting Shakespeare to opera. He had a very early success in Macbeth, and it was in his middle period where he also composed Rigoletto and Traviata and Il Trovatore. So he was already into converting Shakespeare into opera. His early librettist wasn't quite up to the task, and so the middle period Macbeth is not quite the masterpiece that the later Otello and Falstaff would become. But by his late period, he had established a great relationship with a tremendous librettist in Boito. And Boito enabled him to have a libretto, a compression of the Shakespearean text, which would allow him to compose music and bring the whole creation up to the level of Shakespeare. In other words, what Shakespeare's Othello was to the stage, Verdi's opera Otello was to the stage, to the operatic stage. He was on a par with Shakespeare when he had Boito working with him. So this becomes an amazing challenge then for the actor. It means now that if I agree to play Falstaff, or if I agree to play Othello or Iago, I'm agreeing, as far as I'm concerned, we're talking about what you want to do with acting. I'm agreeing that I'm going to work as hard on my acting of that character as I am on singing the music. It means that I'm committed to portraying Iago or Othello or Macbeth or King Lear as convincingly as an actor as I would be if I were called to do it on the straight stage. Very few opera singers, except for, I mentioned John Vickers. He had this same conviction, and so there were a few. So I'm not saying I'm the only one by far. No, of course not. But not many of us really took that kind of conviction. So King Lear, which is probably my favorite Shakespearean play, Verdi wanted to set that into opera. He didn't have a good enough librettist at the time, and it was one place where Verdi came to an understanding within himself, for right or wrong, that he was just not the equal of Shakespeare. He said when he got to the place where Lear finds himself on the heath, he became terrified and could not write any music. And what he had been writing for Lear lay there in sketches and drafts, and at that same time he got a commission to set Victor Hugo's play Le Roi s'amuse, The King's Amusement, into an opera. And he saw in that opera, which is about a hunchback named Triboulet in the play, and Triboulet becomes Rigoletto in the Piave libretto. And so he accepted the challenge to write this play and create a new opera, which eventually became called Rigoletto, about a hunchback who is a father and a father's curse, and he loses his daughter in terrible circumstances. And when he was starting to compose that opera, he had in his brain, in his mind, everything that he'd been working on for King Lear. And so what he did was take everything he had for Lear and he put it into a new opera called Rigoletto. And so Rigoletto becomes really a combination character, a combination of Lear and Lear's Fool. So it becomes almost on the par of Shakespeare's play King Lear. It's not quite, because again, his librettus was not at the skill level of Boito. He could not condense the play Le Roi s'amuse to make it into a vehicle that would take Shakespearean heaviness. I mean, Victor Hugo was a fine thespian, but he was no Shakespeare. I think we can all agree on that. But so when I approached the role of doing Rigoletto, and I was going to be touring it with Goldovsky, I did it first by preparing King Lear. I read Lear, I worked on Lear, I ate, slept, and drank Lear. And then I put it away, and I went to work on the Verdi score of Rigoletto. And I didn't consciously try to make the character into Lear. It just happened. And we had no discussions about it. No one said anything about it, but it was obviously moving people, and the audience members and other cast members. It was a moving experience like Lear. And finally, we were in the Goldovsky tour, and we did the opera at, I believe it was the University of Maryland, I think. I'm not quite sure. But we did it so many places. I think it was University of Maryland where we did it. And the drama critic, or a drama professor, was there to write up a review for the school paper. And he was the one who brought this up in the review. Mr. Goldovsky had never made any reference to this in my work about Rigoletto, but the drama critic there from the University of Maryland said, Mr. Shore's Lear-like portrayal was done very well. Then he, said some nice things. He said, my only reservation is that it seems all so borrowed from Shakespeare. And there you see, I had to laugh there because no one had done that. We hadn't consciously done that. Certainly not Mr. Goldovsky. And I had not consciously tried to do that at all. It's just the fact. The fact is there that Verdi wrote an operatic King Lear when he wrote Rigoletto. So that puts a lot of burden on the actor to do a Shakespearean-worthy role, to do a Lear-like role. So my intention, here we get to this, my intention was to use the method in opera, just as Chaliapin had done, and sing with the great tone, the great singing method of bel canto, and have both great singing and great acting in one form on the stage, so that it would inspire the audience in some way, so that they would investigate within themselves, or even just a few people, think the deep thoughts within themselves about these great issues. What is life all about? What does it mean to lose something? What is truth? What is beauty? What is meaning to you? And these are the deep things which, if people will investigate them, if they will at least ponder them, it will change their lives. Your life will be much different if you ponder the great issues than if you just live a comic book cartoon life where all you're concerned about is getting as much money and as much fame as you can. Now maybe some people will be happy with that. But I knew a lot of opera singers who were really unhappy, and yet they'd risen to the top. They were making a good living singing opera, and their engagement books were full, and they had plenty of fame, and they were very unhappy people. And so it is an important question to ask yourself as an artist, what do I want to do with my acting? Now, I quickly found out, and you will too, what kind of gifting you have or don't have, and how much work you have to put in if you don't have natural gifting in some areas. I don't know how De Niro prepares a character. I've never heard him say. But I studied a lot Uta Hagen's method about creating a character, and I knew that that approach would work for me. So I used that approach. And when I got on stage, I found very quickly that I could trust the character to teach me more about itself. So I became able to make new substitutions on stage just like that, and without rehearsing them, put them right into the action, right on stage. And so the character had a vivaciousness of its own, And I was learning from it at the same time. And things that later became standard for me to do in a certain role, I learned them all little by little from the character teaching them to me. And when I retired from opera, I missed my characters. Those characters are virtually real. They live inside me, in here mainly. They live inside me as a rearrangement of my hopes and fears and emotions and expressions. They are virtual realities. And so I don't have a multiple personality disorder, but if you're a good actor, all of your characters will make you better for doing them well. Does that make any sense? You will be a better human being for being a good actor. Now that's quite a big mouthful to say, and it's subject to dispute. Maybe you don't think so. Maybe you think, there's no relationship in human character and in this skill that we call acting. And we've all known some sons of bitches who were lousy human beings and good actors. And so that seems to put the lie to what I'm saying. But I'm going to stand by it and tell you I do in fact believe that you'll be a better human being and that you will therefore be happier if you give yourself to your characters the way in which the method makes you become the character, by allowing the character to come from you. And you then are enriched by the character. And so then you have a very interesting relationship with the audience. The audience, they have a connection to you when you use this kind of method. They sense the virtual realities that are going on. That is the suspension of disbelief, to leap over the virtual and to connect with reality. And if you're a good actor, you enable the audience to do this by firing, or causing to fire, I should say, neurons that are all through the brain called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons used to be called monkey see, monkey do neurons, but they're more than that. Mirror neurons in the brain enable someone in the audience to see you on stage as a character, and enables them in the audience to actually literally feel what the character feels. Now that's the bioelectrical truth of the matter. That's how, in fact, there is a connection. And that's why stage acting is different from motion television acting. I mean, from TV acting or movies, just singing or just acting to the camera. I know that there is a difference. There is a difference, at least to me. I need that connection to the audience. And if I'm hampered in any way so that I can't make that connection, I don't do a good job. I flub it up. I just can't do it. And there's another aspect that you need to contemplate too when you answer the question, what do I want to do with my acting? What kind of roles can you do? Let's say you're a method actor, but you're not polymorphous like De Niro. I'm sure if someone wrote a part for a female doorknob, that Bobby De Niro could manage to play it. But most of us are not polymorphous. Most of us do have some boundaries, some characters we play better than others. Now, we may not be pigeonholed in a small variety of roles. You don't want that. We may have a respectable size in our repertoire of variety of different character types that we can play well, but there is a boundary. Very few people can play all characters thoroughly convincing as the method would aspire to be. And I found my own limits. I found where they were. I found them the hard way by agreeing to do the role and ending up on the stage and seeing and feeling within myself, my God, this is not working. And I could even stand outside of myself if I wanted to and say, man, this stinks. Joe, you can't do this. Everybody has their own parameters of what causes that. So, in the method, we don't have to have substitutions that are exactly like the character. We hope that you don't have that. If you play a murderer, we hope that you haven't murdered anyone in real life. But somewhere back in your life, you have committed some act that can be substituted and can bring that out in a convincing way. Maybe as a kid you killed an animal and how horrible it made you feel, or how elated it made you feel, whatever. That's something that, if you work through it, you can use as a substitution. It doesn't matter that in the play you have to be a murderer of a human being. It's the essence of the experience, the emotion that you need for the strength of the substitution. For example, in Rigoletto, his daughter is tragically killed, being stabbed, and how was I going to prepare for that in a method way? I have a daughter, but thank God she's never been stabbed, okay? So it's not like that. It's not looking for direct. It's looking for something like that, in essence. And I did have an experience where a dear cat of mine, wonderful, beautiful cat. Oh, this is almost too much to go into. But she was killed in a terrible way. And I came upon her body, and I just went freaking nuts. Now, it took a while to be able to have that experience available to me to use as an actor. If you're still emotionally involved in a turmoil with something that's happened, you can't use it. But after I had worked through that experience, it became the substitution that I used when I played the part of Rigoletto and discover my own daughter has been stabbed. And I guarantee you the essence of the experience came through to the audience with full with a full-bodied realization. Now, my limits had to do with the kind of emotions I was comfortable in bringing up inside of me for certain characters. And we could go into the psychoanalysis of why they were difficult for me to use. I don't want to go there. That's a different subject, okay? But I had an assignment to play two very difficult baritone roles. Both of them were rapists, and both of them were violent, torturous rapists. And I found myself unable to inhabit that character as well as I did all my others. There was some holding back. At some level, I just couldn't make a virtual character that was emotionally true as my other characters were. So, what's the solution? You chop those characters out of your repertoire. I did Scarpia once, actually 2 performances, 1 production. I said, well, that's that. Not going to do that one again. And the other one was Barnaba in La Gioconda, which is the worst, most horrible, bestial character in all of Italian opera. I said, well, that's the only time for that. They just chopped them out. I would not think of doing them again. They were not characters that I could use to inspire people. Now, when I say inspire, I'm not talking about anything preachy. I'm not talking about anything that is outside of acting itself. Inspiration comes from the connection of individuals. And in that great connection that the audience establishes with you while you're doing the method, in that great connection, there's a great happening. There's something really tremendous that takes place there. And you'd have to write a whole thesis, do a doctoral on that to do it justice. It's that intense, it's that involved, it's that important. This will give you it gives me a laugh. See, I started out as an intellectual, and I had a plan to be a graduate professor in philosophy or theology. I got my bachelor's degree in theology. I got a master's degree in theology, and I thought, and I was ready to go for the doctorate and get started teaching, when I discovered inside myself that I wasn't happy with that. It wasn't really what I really wanted to do, and it wasn't really how I wanted to work with my life. And it came to me through the inside of investigating me that I wanted to be a singing actor, and how I wanted to best move people was not from the pulpit spouting out great sermons, or from the lectern when in a university spouting out great words of wisdom from Plato. I wanted to interact with people by being a singing actor. And that's when I made a 180-degree shift in career from being a professor to being an opera singer. But as I started into opera, things were very easy And I had these crazy thoughts in my head. I said, well, I guess I won't ever use any of that stuff in philosophy and theology that I've learned. I guess I'll never use that on stage for anything. And boy, did I have a surprise coming. Every bit of intellectual information that you have learned in any discipline will be useful to you as an actor. And I have used every bite of information I learned about philosophy and theology and other disciplines too, psychology. I have used every bite of that in my work as an actor. Nothing is wasted. No experience is wasted. It's all potential information that you'll draw on to make an impact in somebody's life. That's what I'm calling inspiration, to inspire people. I'm not talking about something phony baloney like making people jump up and down and buy your records. That's not it, okay? And that's why Vickers said maybe it'd be worthwhile to give the performance just if you touched one or two people in the audience. It's that important. Did you know that your acting was that important? Did you know that if you touched another human being, that it could make your life exponentially valuable? There's much you have to consider when you answer this question. What do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do with my acting? And there was a point when I thought, well, gee, all the stuff I've learned about acting, will I ever get to use it in opera? And as soon as I got in on stage and started creating characters, I found out I used every bit. I used every word of Uta Hagen. I used her books like the Bible, her exercises like yoga. Everything that is in the actor's workbook needs to be in your workbook if you're a singing actor, an operatic actor, or if you're a musical actor. I know we think of the Broadway musical as being a lesser form of art, but anytime you're on the stage and being a character, whether you're singing or speaking the words, everything about acting applies. So that's where I'm going to leave you with, my friends who are singers and actors, just with those thoughts about bringing it to the fore. What do you want to do as an actor? And we'll talk later.